I wasn't looking for anything. It was just another ordinary evening. My wife, Emma, was in the kitchen, finishing up the dishes. Our son, Noah, was in the living room, drawing with crayons. And I was at the dining table, casually scrolling through my phone, until I saw their names. And my entire world collapsed. It was an email. Obituaries, recent notices in your area. I don't remember subscribing to anything like that. Maybe it was spam. Maybe it was some mistake. But instead of deleting it, I clicked. And there, at the top of the page, was Emma's name and Noah's, both of them, listed as deceased. My pulse spiked. I stared at the screen, my mind scrambling for an explanation. Emma Reeves, age 36, passed away on October 2nd. Noah Reeves, age 7, passed away on October 2nd. I felt like I had been punched in the chest, because today was October 2nd, and Emma was right there, and Noah was sitting on the carpet, alive and breathing. So why the hell were their names on a funeral home's website? Babe! Emma's voice snapped me back. I looked up. She was standing in the doorway, drying her hands on a towel. You okay? You look pale. I opened my mouth, closed it. What was I supposed to say? Hey, honey, I just found your obituary. Do you have a second to explain that? No, I needed to figure this out first. So I forced a smile. Yeah, just got distracted reading something weird. She smirked. One of your conspiracy sites again? Yeah. I laughed weakly. She rolled her eyes and walked back to the kitchen. I glanced at Noah. He was still drawing, humming softly to himself, completely unaware that, according to this website, he didn't exist anymore. I turned back to my phone, scrolled down. There was more. Emma and Noah are survived by their loving husband and father, Mark Reeves. Me. A private memorial service will be held for family and friends. There was an address, a funeral home, only 15 minutes from our house. I swallowed hard. This had to be a mistake, some kind of clerical error, but I had to be sure. I glanced at Emma. She was washing the last dish, oblivious. Noah was still coloring. I forced myself to stand. I need to step out for a bit, I said casually. Emma turned. Now? Yeah, just something I need to check on. She frowned slightly. Is everything okay? I forced a smile. Yeah, won't be long. And before she could press further, I grabbed my keys and drove to the funeral home. The parking lot was empty. The lights inside were dim. I hesitated before stepping out. This was stupid. A waste of time. Emma and Noah were alive. This was just a glitch, a system error. But something inside me whispered that it wasn't. That something was very, very wrong. I walked to the door and pushed it open. The funeral home smelled like disinfectant and old flowers. A single employee sat at the front desk, a woman in her 50s. She glanced up, smiling politely. Can I help you? I swallowed. Yeah, I saw an obituary listed for my wife and son. I think it's a mistake. Her smile faded. She sat up straighter. Name? Emma and Noah Reeves. She frowned, typed something into her computer. The screen reflected in her glasses. Then her face paled. She looked at me, confused. Mr. Reeves? I felt a cold chill crawl up my spine. Yeah. She hesitated. You already came by this morning. You made the arrangements yourself. I felt my stomach drop. What do you mean? I asked, my voice unsteady. The funeral director frowned at me. You came in this morning, Mr. Reeves. You made the arrangements yourself. She turned her computer screen toward me, and there on the screen was a signed document. My name, my handwriting, authorizing Emma and Noah's service. I took a step back. This was wrong. I hadn't been here before. I hadn't signed anything. Emma and Noah were alive. So why the hell was my signature on that form? I think there's a mistake, I stammered. The woman studied me. She was concerned now. Are you feeling all right, Mr. Reeves? I forced a nod. Yeah, can I see the records? She hesitated, then sighed. Give me a second. She got up and walked toward the back office. The moment she disappeared, I moved. I didn't know why. Just that something deep inside me screamed to act. I leaned over her desk, scrolled through the screen, looked for anything that didn't make sense. And then I saw it. A time-stamped log. I had signed the forms at 10:13 a.m., but that wasn't possible. Because at 10:13 a.m., I was at home, having breakfast with Emma and Noah. The room suddenly felt too quiet. I looked up and felt a wave of nausea. The funeral home had a large glass window facing the parking lot. And standing outside, near my car, was Emma, watching me. I felt an icy chill creep up my spine. Her face was expressionless. Her eyes locked onto mine. She wasn't moving, wasn't even blinking, just standing there, watching. I moved toward the door. "Emma," I called out. She didn't react, didn't even flinch. I took a step closer. And then, she turned, walked to the passenger side of my car, opened the door, and got in, like she had been waiting for me to drive her somewhere. My hands were slick with sweat. What the hell was happening? I turned back toward the desk, and froze. The funeral director was standing in the doorway. Her face was pale. Her voice was soft. "Mr. Reeves, I just checked something. There's no record of your wife and son ever being alive." I felt like I had been punched in the chest. "What?" I whispered. She swallowed. "There's no birth certificate for your son. No marriage license for your wife. No records at all. It's like they were never real." I shook my head. "That's not possible." But the words caught in my throat, because a thought crept in. Something I hadn't considered before. Something too horrible to believe. What if they weren't real? I backed away. "I need to go." The woman reached for me. "Mr. Reeves, wait." I didn't listen. I turned, ran out of the funeral home, and climbed into my car. Emma was still in the passenger seat, calm, waiting. "Where did you go?" she asked softly. Her voice sent a shiver down my spine. The car ride was silent. Emma just watched me, not saying anything, not asking anything. Noah wasn't in the back seat. I had left him at home. But when I pulled into the driveway, he was standing at the window, waiting for us. Something was very wrong. My wife, my son, were they even real? Or had I been living with ghosts? I needed answers. I needed proof. I had to go inside. Emma walked ahead of me, stepping into the kitchen. I waited until she was out of sight. Then, heart hammering, I made my move. Straight to my office. Straight to my filing cabinet. And I started digging. Marriage certificate. Noah's birth certificate. Something to prove they existed. But all I found were empty folders. Like the documents had been removed. Like someone had been here before me. Then, I heard her voice. "What are you looking for?" I spun around. Emma stood in the doorway, still smiling. Like she already knew. Like she had been expecting this. "You're acting strange, Mark." Her tone was too calm. Like she was testing me. I forced a smile. "Just looking for an old bill." Her eyes darkened. "Don't you trust me?" My skin crawled. This wasn't my wife. Not really. Something was pretending to be her. And somehow I had forgotten the truth. I had been living in a lie. I had been trapped. And now, she knew I was starting to remember. Emma stood in the doorway, blocking the exit. Her smile was too perfect. Too calculated. "Don't you trust me, Mark?" My mouth was dry. Every instinct told me to lie. To act normal. To pretend I didn't just realize that my own wife might not be real. "Of course I do," I forced out. Her smile didn't waver. "Then why are you looking for something that isn't there?" A cold chill ran down my spine. She knew. She knew I was doubting everything. I swallowed hard. "Just needed to find an old bill. Thought I left it in here." Emma studied me. For too long. Like she was processing my words. Then she stepped aside. "Okay," she said, voice soft. "Let's have dinner." Noah was already at the table, coloring, humming to himself, like he wasn't bothered by any of this, like he didn't notice that something was terribly, horribly wrong. Emma set down plates, sat across from me, and just watched me eat. "You've been acting strange all day," she said finally. I forced a laugh. "Just tired." She tilted her head. "You went out." I froze. My fork hovered over my plate. "Yeah. Where did you go?" I couldn't tell her the truth. Couldn't tell her I had been at her own funeral home, that I had seen my own signature authorizing her burial, that I had seen her standing outside, watching me. I had to be careful. "Just needed some air," I said. Cleared my head. Emma's fingers tapped against the table. Rhythmic. Slow. She didn't blink. Then, after a long moment, she nodded. "That's good, Mark." But the way she said it, like she already knew I was lying. That night I waited, pretended to fall asleep. Waited until Emma's breathing slowed. Until Noah's nightlight cast its soft glow under his door. Then I slipped out of bed, quietly, carefully, and headed for the front door. I needed to leave. I needed to get the hell out of here. I reached for the lock, and froze. There were new locks on the door. Deadbolts that weren't there before. I tried turning them. They wouldn't budge. I checked the windows. Nailed shut. My breath hitched. They had locked me in. Like they expected me to try and run. Like I had tried before. Then a voice behind me. "Mark." I spun around. Emma stood in the dark hallway. Watching. Not angry. Not scared. Just waiting. "Come back to bed." Her voice was soft. Too soft. Like she had already won. And I realized, with a sinking feeling, I had nowhere to go. The next morning, I pretended like nothing was wrong. Pretended that I hadn't tried to leave. That I hadn't discovered the doors were locked from the outside. That I hadn't noticed Emma watching me while I slept. I waited until she was in the shower. Then grabbed the house phone. Tried 911. No dial tone. Just static. I hung up. Tried calling my brother, David. This time someone answered. "Hello." I let out a breath of relief. "David, thank God. Listen, something's wrong. Something's really, really wrong." There was a pause. Then his voice changed. Flatter. Colder. "Mark." My blood ran cold. "You're not supposed to remember." I nearly dropped the phone. "What?" "Stop fighting it." His voice was off. Wrong. Like he was repeating something. Like he wasn't really there. "You chose this, Mark." "Chose what?" I demanded. "To be happy." The line went dead. I stood there, heart pounding. David wasn't real. The phone call wasn't real. Emma and Noah weren't real. I didn't know how or why or when, but I had been trapped. Locked inside a perfect little life that wasn't real. And now I was starting to remember. I had one last idea. One last test. I ran upstairs. Into the bathroom. And turned toward the mirror. I had to see it for myself. Had to know if I was really here. If my reflection would match. If I was real. I braced myself. And looked up. My reflection was wrong. The bathroom looked the same. The cabinets. The light fixtures. But my own face? It was off. The skin was too smooth. Like a photo of me had been stretched over something else. Like I was wearing my own face. And then, my reflection blinked. But I hadn't. Couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Because the thing in the mirror wasn't me. It looked like me. Same face. Same eyes. Same body. But when I blinked, didn't. It just stared back. Smiling. A sound behind me. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. I turned fast. Emma stood in the doorway. Watching. Always watching. "What are you doing, Mark?" Her voice was too calm. Like she already knew. I stepped away from the mirror. Tried to act normal. Just fixing my hair. Emma tilted her head. She didn't blink. Didn't move. Then she smiled. "You never used to look in the mirror." My blood ran cold. "What?" She took a step closer. "You always avoided it. You said it made you feel uneasy." Her voice was gentle. Too gentle. Like a parent reminding a child of something they'd forgotten. "Do you remember now?" I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because I had never said that. I had never avoided mirrors. Had I? I swallowed hard. Needed to change the subject. Needed to get away from her. I need some air." Emma's smile didn't fade. No, you don't. My chest tightened. Emma, you're exactly where you belong, Mark. She reached for me, and I ran. The house starts changing. I bolted down the hallway, into the bedroom, slammed the door shut, locked it. My breath came fast, ragged. This wasn't real. Couldn't be real. Then, I turned, and my stomach dropped. Because the bedroom was wrong. The bed was missing. The windows were gone. The walls were smooth, seamless, like they weren't walls at all, just a blank, endless surface, like a set in a movie, a fake room. And in that moment I realized the house was changing, rearranging itself, trapping me. A knock on the door, soft, slow. Mark. It was Noah, my son. His voice was trembling. Dad, please open the door. I hesitated. I had been so sure Emma wasn't real. But Noah? Could he be? I took a step forward. Another knock. Please, Dad. I'm scared. My hand hovered over the doorknob. And then, I heard it. A whisper. From the other side. A voice too low, too warped. Not a child's voice. Not Noah's. Let me in, Mark. I stumbled back. Heart pounding. The walls shifted again. The door behind me disappeared. And suddenly, I was somewhere else. The room was small, dimly lit. No windows, just rows of metal filing cabinets, stretching into the dark. And on every drawer, a label, a name. I moved forward, slowly, scanning the names. Some I didn't recognize, some that felt vaguely familiar. And then, I saw my own. Mark Reeves. My pulse spiked. I reached for the handle, pulled the drawer open. Inside, a thin manila folder. My hands shook as I picked it up, opened it, and saw the truth. There was only one piece of paper, printed case file. At the top, in bold letters, subject, Mark Reeves, program status, active simulation, memory rebuild, successful. My vision blurred. The words swam on the page. No, this couldn't be real. But it was. I wasn't real. Not the way I thought. I wasn't living in a house. I was living in a simulation, a controlled environment, where I had been placed, where I had been watched, where I had been experimented on. And Emma and Noah? They were just parts of it. My hands trembled. I turned to the last section of the document. And there, at the bottom of the page, one final note. Subject showing signs of awareness. Termination protocol initiated. I stared at the paper. My hands shook violently. Subject showing signs of awareness. Termination protocol initiated. I wasn't real. My house wasn't real. Emma. Noah. All of it a controlled experiment. And now they were erasing me. A loud hiss filled the air. The room shook. The walls began to dissolve. Like pixels breaking apart. Like the entire world was coming undone. I bolted toward the exit. But the hallway beyond was collapsing too. Everything was vanishing. A voice boomed overhead. Subject escaping containment. I ran. But the floor glitched beneath me, turning to empty white nothingness. I grabbed onto a flickering doorway, pulled myself through, and found myself somewhere new. The space was massive, dimly lit. Rows of screens lined the walls. And on each one my life. One screen showed me and Emma laughing in the kitchen. Another showed me playing with Noah in the backyard. Another showed me at the funeral home. All of it recorded. Like a TV show. Like a simulation. And at the very center of the room, a control panel. With a single button. Full system reset. I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around. And there she was. Emma. But not the Emma I knew. She was different. Dressed in sterile white clothing. Her hair pulled back. Expression cold. Detached. Like she wasn't even trying to pretend anymore. Mark. Her voice was flat. Empty. Step away from the panel. I backed up. My breath came in sharp bursts. What is this? I demanded. She sighed. You weren't supposed to wake up. Wake up from what? Her eyes darkened. You died, Mark. The words hit me like a knife. What? Your real body. It died a long time ago. She gestured toward the screens. This was all you had left. A safe place. A perfect life. I shook my head. That's a lie. She took a slow step forward. Then why can't you remember anything before this? My breath caught. My mind spun. She was right. I tried to remember. Tried to think of a memory before Emma, before Noah, before this house. Nothing. Just a blank void. Because my real life didn't exist anymore. This was all that was left of me. And now they were going to erase that too. Emma's hand hovered over the reset button. We can make this painless, Mark. Let me go, I whispered. There's nowhere to go. My fists clenched. My entire life a lie. All those memories fabricated. I had two choices. Let them erase me. Or fight for whatever was left. I lunged forward. Slammed my hand onto the control panel. And hit a different button. Override system lock. The room exploded with alarms. Emma's face twisted in panic. No. What did you do? The screens flickered wildly. Scenes of my life glitching, distorting. The simulation was breaking. The world was coming apart. Emma reached for me. And froze. Her body convulsed. Then, she disintegrated into static. Gone. The floor beneath me cracked. Reality itself collapsed. Everything was turning to white. I felt my body coming undone. And then, darkness. I woke up somewhere new. A bright, sterile room. Blinding lights above me. Machines humming. I tried to move, but I was strapped to a bed. Tubes in my arms. A monitor beeping softly. A door opened. Two men in lab coats stepped in. One of them checked the monitor. Unbelievable, he muttered. He forced a full system collapse. The other doctor shook his head. He wasn't supposed to wake up. The first man sighed. What do we do with him now? A long pause. Then, put him back in.